Good morning. We are quite sorry to be a few minutes late this morning. We had technical difficulties, but thanks for being with us. My name is Karen Seymour-Ells, and I serve as a trustee here at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. We want to welcome everyone to our open and inclusive virtual community this morning. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many spiritual paths to truth and meaning, and we pledge to support one another as we explore these paths. We are so glad we were able to get things working and that you were able to find us and join us for our live stream service today. Please check the church website at dupageuchurch.org for updates. If you search under DuPage UU Church on Facebook, you will find additional ways to be in community with us as well. One additional announcement. Today, after the service, if you look for instructions in your order of service, you can join us for a Zoom coffee hour. They have been really popular. A lot of people have come to join us. Thank you so much for making that possible to our volunteers.
Good morning. Good morning. I am not the Reverend Michael Walker. I am Steve Cooper, Director of Religious Education here at the church. Mike is not feeling very well this morning, so out of caution, he decided to not do the service. So we did kind of a swap around and we're reading each other's parts. This morning, we light our chalice in recognition of the natural world, the source of all, and for the beauty we find all around us. Just outside, among all the trees and green life, stands the Cathedral of Nature, awesome and magnificent. We humans have a responsibility for this planet. We are the stewards of the earth, not the dominators, but the stewards. Let us keep the wilds pristine and beautiful, and a sacred space encompassing the globe. For nature is the source of all, including us. May it ever be so, and blessed be you all. The opening hymn this morning is number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. Please join me in our spoken affirmation, which will be followed by our sung affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
It is time to gather. This story is Henry David Thoreau and the Cottage by Tracy L. Hurd. This is a story about a boy who loved the outdoors. His name was Henry David Thoreau. All his life he loved nature. It was almost as if he had a small, still voice inside him that whispered, "Go outside, be amidst the trees and lakes and grass. This is your home." Henry listened to that voice all of his life. This is his story. Henry lived in Concord, Massachusetts, more than 100 years ago. The town had some buildings, but all around there were forests and ponds, rivers and fields. Henry loved being outdoors. He loved to explore. He liked the feeling of being close to the earth, of being surrounded by plants, bugs, birds, and wildlife. Outside, Henry was never bored. He was busy watching, finding, and enjoying nature. Outside, Henry felt at home. Henry kept notes about nature and liked to share ideas about what he saw. Later, when he was grown up, he wrote that nature was like a special room for the care of children for him. He went to school and church, and he helped with the chores of his family, but most of all, he loved being outdoors. When he went to bed at night, he placed his bed so that he could look out at the stars. For Henry, seeing nature and knowing that he was part of the world around him made him feel most comfortable. Henry grew up and went to school and later to college. He read a lot of books. He was especially interested in books written by transcendentalists who believed that appreciating the beauty of nature is a way of feeling close to the spirit of life or God. Henry listened to that small voice inside him, telling him to spend time outside, exploring in the icy snow or in the summer heat. He became friends with transcendentalists who agreed that even grown-ups can learn a lot by spending time in nature. Henry hoped that one day he could live very simply in nature. He knew he would feel at home. One transcendentalist friend named Ralph Waldo Emerson told Henry, "You should keep a journal about all the things you notice in nature." He also invited Henry to try out his idea of living close to nature. Henry called it his great experiment. He decided to make a very simple home on a large area of land that surrounded Walden Pond. The land was owned by his friend Emerson, who allowed him to live there in exchange for Henry's help doing some repairs around Emerson's house. Henry decided to build his home as small, simple, and plain as could be. He wanted to spend most of his time outside. He wanted to feel close to the land. Henry wanted to have time to notice and write about the changes in nature, the birds, the plants, and the leaves on the trees. Henry made a list of all the things he would need to live on Walden Pond. He tried to include as few things as possible. The list included some tools for farming, a bed, a writing desk, a table, and 3 chairs. With the help of his friends, Henry built a small cabin, just 1 room, 10 feet wide and 15 feet long. He used old wood, bricks from other houses, and windows that nobody else needed to build his small cabin. When it was completed, Henry moved in. Although his friends and family understood what Henry was doing, townspeople found Henry's experiment in living in nature confusing. They wondered why he would want to live that way. But Henry listened to that small, still voice. He felt at home in nature. He planted food for himself to eat, using a small amount of land. He took great care to notice all around him. He watched the changes in the Walden Pond over the seasons. He found everything from grasshoppers to wildflowers to be beautiful and interesting. Henry wrote in his journal, "I look down into the quiet living room of the fishes, pervaded by a soft light. Ah, the fish of Walden. I see them lying on the ice. I'm always surprised by their rare beauty, as if they were fabulous fishes. They possess a quite dazzling beauty." Henry lived on Walden Pond for more than 2 years. He came to town to see people, to work for Emerson, to get some supplies, but mostly Henry remained in his home in the woods. Sometimes people would visit him there. Many children liked his small cabin, and they understood that feeling of being at home in nature. Then, one day, Henry decided that he was finished. He had learned so much from living in nature that he felt ready to try something else. He felt ready to make his home with people again. But he never forgot his time on Walden Pond. He wrote books about it, and he taught other people that caring about nature is important. Some people say that Henry David Thoreau was one of the most important naturalists, writers about nature, that ever lived. Henry was able to listen to that voice inside him that told him he was at home in nature. He was able to live his dream. He felt at peace. As he finished his book about his time at Walden Pond, he wrote, "I learned this, at least, by my experiment, that if one advances confidently, goes in the direction of his dreams, and tries to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected."
This month, we are delivering a series of 4 sermons based upon the concept of 4 faiths or 4 spiritualities, which was first identified by UU minister Fred Campbell. The 4 worldviews he named as being at the foundational level of spiritual consciousness are humanism, theism, mysticism, and naturalism. He posited that these 4 basic units of theology are the building blocks for all larger theological concepts. This week, we are contemplating naturalism. This is what Reverend Campbell wrote about naturalism. Naturalists have a profound sense that humans are dependent upon and involved with the natural world of living and non-living entities. Our relationship to and dependence upon this transcendental reality is the ultimate source of values and meaning in human living. Both humanists and naturalists depend upon science as the primary source informing them about the reality in which we all live. The sense of dependence upon other living organisms and the overall health of the world puts a limit upon the need for control that naturalists have. They seek knowledge and appropriate acceptance within this transcendent reality. Evolution is a central way of understanding time and change for naturalists. A larger percentage of naturalists believe in life after death or reincarnation than do humanists, but most believe in death as the simple end of life. This is consistent with their understanding that human beings are animals governed by the same laws as animals are. Naturalists understand and accept the knowledge gleaned from the ecology movement. They deal with power and control issues, trust and dependence issues very differently than humanists do. Here ends our reading.
Noticing our separation while celebrating today our interconnectedness provides a moment of cognitive dissonance. I know you are out there. Although all I can see is a camera on the wall. In our community, there have been many joys and sorrows to arise, which we cannot share during a broadcast. Even so, we light a candle now to mark our joys and sorrows.
Earlier, Bill shared a reading from a book by Fred Campbell called Religious Integrity for Everyone, Functional Theology for Secular Society. I will refer to this book throughout the month of August, or Reverend Mike will in the future services. In his theological primer, Campbell describes various understandings of theology that he learned from his conversations with members at UU congregations he had served, from which his idea of four faiths emerged. The concept of four faiths, which I think is now more often called Four Spiritualities, has been recognized throughout the UU world as being a fair assessment of our collective theological foundations. Campbell calls the four faiths, or Four Spiritualities, ways of relating to reality with spiritual health. He went on to say, naturalists understand themselves as participants in and dependent upon the natural world as the transcendent reference system of meaning, within which they find their religious identity. The natural world includes all living organisms on the globe and all elements of our universe. This faith also strongly trusts the sciences for knowledge of the world and to describe reality. For many years now, I have observed myself standing in a metaphorical liminal space. That is, my personal understanding of theology straddles naturalism, theism, mysticism, and humanism. Some people have a tendency to stand more closely to one of the four. Some combine two or three of the four, and some, like me, Reverend Mike, incorporate elements of all four into their personal understandings of existence, and as the sources we draw upon for answers to the big questions. For me, I feel a sense of awe and wonder when standing out in any sacred space, such that the naturalist John Muir called the Cathedral of Nature. I experience a sense of connectedness there, just as I experience it in relationship within human community. I've experienced an entity that I call divine, making me a theist. That experience came to me in a way that we would call mystical. My understanding of that entity is pantheistic, part and parcel of all existence, and we are a part of it, which is naturalistic. Finally, I believe that humanity, being sentient and self-aware, conscious and inquisitive, provides us with an understanding of the holy within ourselves, and that connects us to all others, which is humanist. For me, naturalism, theism, mysticism, and humanism are all different facets of the same jewel. I do honor to the contributions of science because they help me understand the world better. At the same time, I recognize that some people have found other ways of knowing, and that those other ways of knowing sometimes reveals to us possible answers to mysteries that science has not yet solved. This is not to say that science won't ever have answers for those particular mysteries, but they just might not have those answers yet. As much as we know, I also believe that there is so much that we do not yet know. That is the mystery in which we move, live, and breathe, and into which we pour our very souls. I would imagine that many of us have stories of times that we were walking in the woods, hiking up in the mountain trail, or watching the sunset over the ocean. Many of us can speak of feeling part of something greater, something huge and magnificent beyond our full comprehension when we are there, out in nature. I have many such stories myself, but I would like to share one that is very different and one that I have never shared here before. And this is Mike's story. It was exactly 20 years ago while I was standing on active duty in the Navy and had a 3-year assignment providing medical care to Marines, and about to see 1,000 of my closest friends were deployed to Okinawa, Japan, where we all lived together on the edge of the jungle for half a year. I had a buddy named Jenner who was kind of like my little brother. We decided that while we lived on this little semi-tropical island far out in the Pacific Ocean, we would learn to scuba dive. Maybe it's hard to imagine, but at one time I was a certified diver, or Rev Mike was. Jenner and I and a group of divers went off to Maida Beach in the late afternoon one day, and during our first dive of the day, we explored the coral reef, heading east and south from the beach. And that day, Jenner and I followed an octopus through an underwater cavern and saw little tunicates that looked like Christmas trees fluttering in the current until you get too close to them and then pop, they disappeared inside a little hole. We saw nettibranches, gorgeous orange and yellow, blue and pink sea creatures fluttering along, and if we had known better, we would have had no idea that they were relatives of the common garden slug. Evolution has done amazing things below the waves. We also saw the very beautiful and dangerous sea star called the Crown of Thorns. And unlike other starfish you have probably seen, this is a giant, bright green star covered with sharp barbs. Like many other things in the ocean, it is poisonous. It also tends to eat the coral reefs and are therefore dangerous to the environment. But they have a predator, a beautiful mollusk with a mottled golden brown spiral shell that can grow as big as 2 feet long. Unfortunately, poachers love those beautiful shells and sell them for over 5,000 yen, which is around $50 or so. For that reason, many divers use their diving knives to snap off the tip of the shell because of the poachers, because they wouldn't want them anymore. It actually does no harm to the mollusk inside the shell, and most importantly though, this leaves the mollusk to live another day to hunt the Crown of Thorns, thereby saving the coral reef. The natural world is so fascinating. So my friend Jenner and I were around 30 feet below the surface of the ocean. And I should mention that my friend and dive buddy Jenner wore glasses, but one can't wear glasses under a mask when you dive because that would break the seal of the mask. And you can get special lenses made for a diving mask, but that is expensive, and Jenner just hadn't gotten around to it yet. So his visibility underwater was somewhat limited to about 5 feet in front of him. Also, remember that we have breathers in our mouths and cannot talk. One of the things that we learn from our dive instructors is underwater sign language, to have some sort of rudimentary communication within our dive. But being something that one doesn't do all the time, it is sometimes easy to forget. At one point, I saw in a crevice in the reef, peeking out at us, a white, black banded sea snake, which is very poisonous. Luckily, they have very tiny jaws, so it's unlikely they will be able to munch on something as big as a human being. They go after small creatures, but we are better off leaving them alone. And I tapped on Jenner's shoulder and pointed at the snake so that he'd know where it was at, except it was about 10 feet away and he couldn't see it. So he began to swim closer. Somewhat alarmed, I grabbed his flippers and began swimming backwards, which must have looked like an Abbott and Costello routine at about 30 feet below the surface. Well, of course now, I remembered the danger sign, which I should have done in the first place. Well, we survived that little episode. As part of our virtual services, I've been offering my sermons in 2 parts, so I'm going to break here and return to the coral reefs in a few moments.
You now know more about naturalism. This worldview is the basis of one of the Western world's best-known legal systems, natural law. Natural law is seen as independent of, pre-existent to, any positive law of any given political order, society, or nation-state. Natural law holds that it is just natural and normal for parents to support young children and for children to support their parents in old age, and for communities to support their members and members to support their communities. How could it be otherwise? It's just natural. In this spirit, our morning offering will now be given.
So we'll now return to the awesome grandeur of the world as Rev Mike was experiencing on the diving trip in Okinawa, Japan. So a little later on the same day, we and the other divers took a break on the beach and watched the sun go down. After dark, we went as a group for another dive. This time, we swam out and headed north of the beach, along an underwater cliff wall that goes down 160 feet. Although we went less than halfway down, I think there was around 6 of us when we all swam down together with headlamps on, lighting the way until we found the cliff wall, and we dove deeper. For this dive, we were going to go down around 70 feet below the surface. We gathered at a spot along the cliff wall at about 20 feet under. Then we all turned off our headlamps and we slowly sank down along the cliff wall into the dark. Down, down, past 25 feet, past 30 feet, and down more. And we slowly let off ballast so we could sink. And we noticed something about the quality of the darkness around us. Between 30 and 70 feet, we saw that despite the fact that we had turned off our lights and it was nighttime, it was not dark. We hadn't been able to see this phenomenon closer to the surface or before the lamps went off, but now we were surrounded by phosphorescent and fluorescent life forms. And I'm going to segue here and then come back to my story. Have any of you seen the James Cameron movie Avatar? Cameron is also a diver, and in fact, in the movie, he had several land-dwelling life forms that were patterned after real Earth life forms from our oceans, such as the creatures that, as the main character of the movie got closer to them, zipped down and disappeared into a hole, just like the Christmas tree tunicates. Also, some may recall from the movie a sense of wonder as the main character was finally able to see through the eyes of the native people, and the whole world began to glow in the dark. Well, that's what it was like at about 30 to 70 feet below the surface of the ocean, at least in the tropical waters of Okinawa. My diver friends and I just hovered there for the longest time as we found ourselves surrounded by millions of little glowing creatures flitting around here and there. The wall of the cliff glowed with phosphorescent plants and animals of all different colors, like an old light bright. You remember that from the 70s? At about 70 feet below, we found ourselves hovering within a cloud of living light, which was an experience unlike any that I've ever had in my life, before or since. A cloud of living light that evoked in me a sense of amazement at the sheer wonder of the world, in parts most of us don't see all that often. This was an experience that Jenner and I talked about for years after. It was almost beyond my ability of words to express, and I am afraid that I do not do justice to the experience now, as I find it difficult to find the words to describe this sense of indescribable beauty. A cloud of living light, of which for a short time we humans got to be a part. Okay, I'm not going to say that I met God below the surface of the sea, but I did have an experience of the natural world that gave me a deep, visceral appreciation of the interdependent web of life. I saw how the coral reefs were living colonies of creatures upon which other creatures depended for shelter or food, and still other creatures that protected the reef from predators. I saw the octopus that just wanted Jenner to leave it alone, and the sea snake that thought we looked pretty darn funny in our Abbott and Costello routine. I saw plants that looked alien, and colorful nudibranches that are 1,000 times prettier than their garden slug cousins. I saw how humanity in its carelessness can do great damage to the reef, but also the ability of the reef to heal itself. There is, of course, a threshold, because the reef can repair itself at a fixed rate, and if we are destroying parts of the reef faster than the rate that the whole ecosystem and part of the ocean can, if we destroy the reef faster than it can repair itself, the whole ecosystem in that part of the ocean could collapse. And I was touched by the simple and conscientious efforts of many divers, breaking the tips of the shells of a mollusk to protect the reef from the ravenous sea star. By breaking the tips of the shells, they did no damage to the mollusk inside, while saving them from human poachers. Science can explain so many of the mysteries of the deep, and yet scientific explanations, while interesting, fall far short of explaining the feelings one has when finding oneself surrounded by a cloud of living light, 70 feet below the surface of a nighttime ocean. Sure, there are creatures looking for mates, others hunting for food, many of them glowing to attract interest for many different reasons. And I realized that this was a web of life that could actually be seen clearly, oh so clearly, and yet hidden from the view of most people. So although I did not see God down there, I saw so much of the world that I would never have known existed if I had not ventured down there. I did have a transcendent experience in that cloud of living light, realizing that we are part of something wonderful. Life on earth is diverse and copious, coming in myriad shapes and colors, from deep under the ocean and across all the lands of earth to way up into the atmosphere. To bridge the gap between naturalism and mysticism, which we'll discuss in a couple weeks, I'd like to share a short reading from another book by a medical doctor named Carl von Essen called Eco-Mysticism, the profound experience of nature as spiritual guide. Von Essen was contemplating the evolution not only of physical life, but also of consciousness. And he wrote, "It is seen in contrast to the abundance of structural fossil remains dating back billions of years that there are yet no fossils of the mind. Those involved in evolutionary psychology must explore our psychic past through analogy with comparative behavioral patterns and neural structures of other species. In examples such as the behavior of protozoa, slime molds, plants and animals, there may be a pattern that connects, suggesting that psychic evolution is analogous to somatic evolution in a continuous, seamless way since the beginning of life. It is not possible, then, that the human spirit is linked through billions of years of symbiotic patterns of sensations, instinct, and behavior to our living world. The process of evolution that shaped the complex interrelationship of all living and non-living things, according to Al Gore, may be understandable scientifically. But the simple fact of the living world and our place on it awakens awe, wonder, and a sense of mystery, a spiritual response. When one reflects on its inner meaning, it is little wonder that humanity has inherited the ancient engrams of memory and cognition that arouse deep feelings when in the magnificence of our natural world, such feelings evoke a love of nature that when manifest can bring us to our senses to preserve what is now being destroyed. Yes, there is a pattern that connects all life in this world. I can often see it. I hope you can as well. But in my case, I had to go clear across the world and 70 feet under the ocean in the dark, no less. But before I really understood what that all means, I just quoted Al Gore, who spoke of the complex interrelationship of all living and non-living things. I encourage everyone who loves life and loves the world to spend time in nature and gain an appreciation for that interconnectedness, because it is beautiful. May it ever be so, and blessed be you all. Our closing hymn today is number 1064 out of our teal hymnal. It's one of our favorites, Blue Boat Home. A cloud of living light, just as in the mighty host of witness from religious long past. Hold us in their sight, hold us together, remind us that we are part of something so much greater than ourselves alone. Let us take the sense of our interconnectedness with us in our work and play. Be it ever mindful of all that we are. Let us build relationships of care, caring for all parts of our ecosystem, including human and not. Let us celebrate and honor all life together. May it ever be so, and blessed be you all.